All right, thank you so much. So this is going to be a little bit more of a free-for-all. Do any of the speakers have burning questions that they want everybody here to be thinking about as we do this? Zach? Jay? I see a question bubbling up there.
One of the things that I wanted to talk about, but I had to cut out, was the importance of land use. I think people really forget about land use when thinking about alternative transportation.
You had 2 more minutes. You were actually 200.
Well, you're welcome, everybody. But yeah, I want people to think about land use and how that impacts alternative transportation and housing.
Can you give an example?
Sure. I was talking about this earlier. We're not going to get buses to serve cul-de-sacs right now. Cul-de-sacs are designed for cars. So land use is a long-term I don't know. We need more density because that's better served by transit. That's how transit works. Is it carries people, lots of people, in the same direction. And if everyone kind of lives far-flung all over the place, it's much harder to be served by transit.
All right, so we're going to open stack again. Brianne is going to be looking for your name tag. You're going to hold your name tag up high and your hand, and/or your hand.
Hi, I'm Don. What I was thinking about here, I was thinking maybe like CMU might be a good place to start since they have so much, knowledge about technology and science. So I'm thinking like all these places in Clariton, right? These these high emission, like steel mills and things. So now and I'm thinking like they should try to invest a certain amount of money and time into finding new technology that they can implant into these steel mills where, it would just cut back on the emissions. Like they could find better technology where they could just have that would allow them to still do the same amount of work and not have to cut back on jobs while still just finding better technology that makes lower emissions into the air so that everyone wins. I don't know. Right.
Do any of the speakers want to answer that question or address that question?
Don, you said your name was? Yeah, see, that's a great question. I don't know. So the Carnegie Mellon University and a lot of different researchers there have been really helpful on a lot of the air quality stuff. Some of the best tools in understanding and mapping where the pollution is and what it's doing have come out of CMU. And I know Rachel mentioned the Smell Pittsburgh app, which lets people submit reports of what they're actually smelling. So there are a lot of great ways that CMU researchers have been helping out. And then the other part of your question about research to actually reduce emissions at the plant, we know that there are many facilities operating today in different parts of the country or in different parts of the world that are already doing these things better and cleaner and safer. And one of the big problems we've seen is, and this is especially true in Clarendon with the U.S. Steel facility, that facility has gotten so little investment from the company over the years that it is falling apart. And so, even the things that they were doing, they're now doing, or they were doing cleaner, they're now doing dirtier because they haven't kept up with the plant. And then we also know that their business model just can't compete with other younger, newer, more green steel companies that have better processes that are running elsewhere in the country. And so part of the problem is we have more solutions than these polluters are using.
Well, doesn't it hurt them if they don't invest in their company? Won't that eventually make them fall behind and go out of business?
Yes.
So wouldn't it, I would think U.S. Steel probably has a big reserve of cash somewhere in the bank that they can put into that.
Mike Stout from the Isaac Walton League. I listened to all three speakers. I work with all three speakers. I respect their organizations. And my question is not to the speakers, it's to the whole group here, is we're dealing with a system that is tilted in favor of the U.S. Steels of the world, number one. Number two, we're dealing with corporations that are nothing but out-and-out outlaws. They don't give a shit about the laws, and they don't care about the communities. They care about one thing, the bottom line, and that's their profit margins. And I went through the same thing people are going through with Clairton 40 years ago with U.S. Steel, and we sued them. And we beat them in court, and they were ordered by the EPA to put in wastewater treatment and air pollution control systems and new technology and new facilities that were more modern and less polluting, and they promised to do it, and they put it in writing, and then 6 months later, they bought Marathon Oil and shut their mills down. And then they turned around and blamed the environmentalists. My question to this group, and I think Zach started to hit the nail on the head, is how do we in this room take the information that we know and put it into a constructive program that the average person out there can understand, number one. And number two, how do we build a political movement that's going to force those politicians to do what we want them to do, because right now they're doing what the corporations want them to do. So my question to this group is how, in the context of what you've heard today about climate change, about air pollution, about transportation, and we all know the water problem and the water main breaks, how do we turn the solutions to that into a political movement that's going to make fundamental change?
Thank you. Okay, so the last hour, the last session, you basically so many of you demanded an hour to start working on those ideas. So, yeah.
So Rachel mentioned that we should start holding people in power accountable. And so my question is to the presenters and everyone here, what meetings are coming up that we need to show up to? Like, I want dates and locations, and I think that would be great for us to share. If anyone has them, I would love to hear them so that we can all hear it.
We will definitely share all of that information out to the mailing list as well.
No, I was just glad that Don brought up, I guess, carbon sequestration, scrubbers, nuclear. That's all stuff that I'd be happy to hear more about.
Thanks. I'm Carl Davidson from Beaver County. I like us to go one step deeper. It's not just a question of how do we pressure the politicians on how to do the right thing. The more important question is how do we become those politicians, rather than just pressuring somebody who really doesn't have our interest or who is kind of wishy-washy. In other words, what I'm saying, it's not quite right to say we have to build a movement. Movements ebb and flow. Capitalism creates movements by its outrages, and they ebb and they flow. What's important for us is to build organization. Organization that can go when the movement ebbs, gather up its strength, and can last over to the next time it flows, so it can gather more strength. So with every ebb and flow, your organization gets stronger. We have to be organization builders, not just movement builders, because then when we have that, you can put our people, us, into those seats of power, which is a big difference than having to pressure the politicians of a different class representing a different constituency.
My name is Cliff Omar Slater. About a decade ago, I was a consultant to the Allegheny County Health Department under Bruce Dixon, and I reported, excuse me, directly to Bruce Dixon. My writ was to modernize and upgrade the entire air pollution monitoring system. That is the monitors that are used throughout the county, and to bring into modernization the tools that the chemical engineers who were doing all of the calculations for the air pollution were using, which in that case was an old Microvax, which was already EOL'd about 10 years. But the point is that the same arguments that propelled Bruce to hire me, and everything I did and the proposals that I made were entirely shelved. The only thing they were worried about was not any kind of public pressure. The Allegheny County Health Board of Directors are political appointees. Their concern was the threat that the EPA would come in and take over the entire monitoring for the area. The needle has never moved by any pressure from public groups, to my knowledge, as somebody who was inside the system. What the threat was that Allegheny County would lose control of actually being able to avoid any of the consequences of their actions and their inactivity in actually bringing into compliance all of the rules that were there. So the bottom line is, I hear people saying our pressure did this. No. It has always been the threat that EPA would take over. We are one of the few regions in the air pollution monitoring in the United States who controls its own monitoring. EPA controls most of them directly. And the bottom line is that what happened was, there are very good people at the health department, good, solid chemical engineers that know how to do the job. But the political will is not there to actually take control and actually obey the law. Rich Fitzgerald appoints all of the board of directors, and those board of directors are political appointees who are beholden to the system, period.
Hi, I'm Al Hart. Among other things, I'm a retired labor person. I wanted to talk about two things that Jay mentioned, one of which I disagree with partially, one of which I want to expand on. Trains versus buses. I used to build trains. I come from a union where our members still build trains. Trains aren't just for white people or rich people. You go to New York City and you can go anywhere on the subway. It's got its problems, but it's a fantastic transportation system compared to what we got here. I lived for a few years in New Haven, Connecticut, and I used to go to New York City on the weekend on a train that we built in Erie, and then ride around any place I wanted to go in the city on the subways. And we also need to look at not just trains versus buses, but trains versus airplanes. I don't know of any way to have a electric plane running on renewable energy, but you can sure do that with electric trains, fueled by renewable sources of electricity. And one of the reasons this country has an out of proportion carbon footprint compared to other countries is because we have a pathetic excuse for a rail passenger transportation system in this country. You go to Japan, you go to Europe, and it's like, this is amazing compared to the chewing gum assembled system we have in the United States. The other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit, because you mentioned land use. Urban sprawl. I mean, if we're going to have a Green New Deal and restructure this economy to be friendly to the environment and to preserve the human race and the habitable world, we have to reverse the process of having all this urban sprawl. Sometimes I need to buy something and I end up, you can't find it in Pittsburgh. You got to go out to Ross or Monroeville to some mall, and you drive through miles and miles of just wasted land, one-story buildings taking up with a huge parking lot. It's just ridiculous. The Green New Deal has to be re-urbanizing America in a whole different way.
Oh, I wanted to speak to the idea that was mentioned of political organization. Oh, could people hear me? So I just wanted to check for people in this room, especially residents of Allegheny County, if they're not familiar with a political action committee called Unite, which was started by Representative Summer Lee. Now, hopefully there are some people who are familiar with it, but I just wanted to give a shout out for that. I don't think I'm the best advocate for it in terms of giving a good kind of spiel, but to your point, I don't see your name, but in terms of people taking the bull by the horns and running for office themselves, that organization is all about supporting that movement that's been going on over the past couple years, particularly in Allegheny County, but also across the country, that a lot more people have been running for office and getting elected from very different backgrounds than had been happening prior to that. And actually, a lot of them are socialists. That's also true too. Not necessarily all of them, though. So anyway, just a little plug there.
Thanks. Okay, time check here. I'm bringing the microphone to Marin. How many more people do we have on stack? Did you get Carol as well? No, I'm just waiting in front. Okay.
We like to keep it friendly here.
Is Jim the last one?
Okay.
All right, so okay, so that would be 4 or 3? 3 after Marin. Okay, so we're gonna cut off stack, then we're gonna take a break, and then people who need to leave, can, the others back.
Okay, this is responding directly. Marta brought up Summer Lee's Unite PAC, and Summer was one of a wave of new electeds in our region. She's now a state rep. And another person who, to answer Carl's point, stepped up and ran is Bethany Hallam, who's now an at-large member of the county council. And they're doing things a little differently now on county council. And part of it is they're not going to be rubber stamping Rich Fitzgerald. Committee chairships were given to new members of council. So Bethany Hallam is the chair of the appointment review committee that oversees all appointments. So Rich Fitzgerald might be able to appoint someone, but they're not just going to rubber stamp that person. And they're, and I'll say it out here, Bethany has asked that people who would be good to be on the Board of Health in particular step up and put themselves forward, and then we can turn it over into a body that can be more effective, while at the same time noting that it's not that people at the health department are terrible people. They're all really good, dedicated people, but they have been hampered by lack of funding and lack of political will from the top. So I lay it at Rich Fitzgerald's door, as much as the Board of Health not being as harsh as they could be.
I'm not gonna have to go to the gym after this.
I wanted to make sure that when we're talking about clean air and transit, that we're thinking about how racialized this is in terms of, you think about Clairton and who lives in Clairton and why it's been allowed to continue on. I lived in Atlanta before I moved here. That airport, the Atlanta airport, is a huge environmental issue for the communities nearby with high rates of asthma. Those are all black communities. It wasn't built north of the city where all the white communities are in this very segregated city. It was built in an area where they knew that the political power wasn't there. And then for transit, I always think about how our commitment to these single-family vehicles is a way to also maintain segregation in many ways, and our refusal to expand it is. Again, living in Atlanta, there was a subway and a bus, and I will tell you, if it wasn't rush hour, I was the only white person on either one of those. Their surrounding counties to the north, consistently voted against transit expansion, and because it's the South, they're pretty blunt about it, which is they didn't want black people in their counties. They didn't want that easy access. So I think we need to be very upfront about how racialized this is, and understanding that a lot of the lack of political will is the knowledge that these, if we can't keep pushing these plants into poor communities of color, they might have to go near us, and the same with transit.
Right, Jim, I'm headed your way.
Our public transportation system throughout the United States has been suppressed since the beginning of this the 1900s. In early 1900s, most of Pittsburgh workers went to work on the streetcar, and Alcoa, Goodyear, GM, and other interests they destroyed. They destroyed it. My dad drove a streetcar that went 80 miles an hour from Pittsburgh to Washington, PA. And people don't believe that the streetcars could actually go that fast, but they went that fast. And the thing is that we have this in Chicago. When Baby Bush got in, Chicago was starting to transfer its bus fleet to hydrogen. And the Bush administration put that to a stop. So the thing is, it's just been corruption from the beginning. The Pittsburgh Railways Company, my dad lost his job because of that. They underbid them, and then they had a monopoly. So they ruined our railway system. And that's the thing is, there is a better world possible. We have a heaven possible.
Who? Oh, sorry.
I'm Rick Ankney. Not exactly sure how to phrase this. One of my frustrations with the Green New Deal is its lack of specifics. The details matter. They matter a lot. A lot of people probably hear Green New Deal and they think, they're going to take away my gasoline. I'm not going to be able to drive my car. They're going to make me stop eating meat. I'm not going to be able to heat my house, right? We don't have those details. And I'm not saying that's a trivial thing to do. It's a really tough thing to do, but I think they matter a lot. We don't have a national energy plan. Neil mentioned a carbon tax. I think a carbon tax is a good idea, but I don't know about you. I'm not completely trustworthy of the market, to get me where we need to go. We don't have we don't even have a Pennsylvania energy plan. I'm not sure we even have a Pittsburgh energy plan that gets us to zero greenhouse gas emissions. We don't have detailed plans for how to heat homes. I don't know about you, but I have a home that's heated by natural gas in part. I just put a mini heat pump system in, but in part it's heated by natural gas. And probably a lot of us are in the same boat. I still drive a internal combustion car. Okay, how do we get? What are the details of how we get from where we are now to where we need to be? Amanda mentioned nuclear power plants. That's part of what we need to answer. We have a bunch of nuclear power plants in the state. What do we do with them? Do we keep them running while we build up other zero carbon energy infrastructure? Those are questions that need to be answered. And if you want to build a political movement, I think that's part of what you have to do. You have to give people the details that they can rally behind.
That could not be a more perfect segue to the next part of our work. So the reason that we began this discussion series is to invite people who have all kinds of expertise to start to develop specific policies to bring to bear all of the wonderful expertise that's out there to start writing our own regional Green New Deal. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, when she sent out her broad resolution, what she said, this is just a broad umbrella. Only people on the local level, working then with the state and the national, can make this real and come up with very specific policy solutions. So I've already met so many people who know so much in so many different fields. And we have 5 months to keep gathering that expertise, finding the expertise that's all around us and connecting. I was the chair of the City County Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Task Force. And over 2 years, we wrote a set of policies that then went to the city for further enactment. There were a lot of experts brought to bear. So this 5-month series is just the beginning. To make those policies real, I do think we need to build political will. We need to support the people at county council and at city council and in the state legislature and the national to actually move these ideas, these policies into reality. So, it is now about 7:07. Some of you are going to have to go. Others, we definitely need about, I think, 7 minutes to just breathe, get some more food, drink, and then we're going to start to develop working groups. We need, and again, these working groups are seeds, right? We need to find the people, like Fred Brown, he's been doing work on rebuilding housing. Marin could say so much about how to build an energy efficient house. She's done it, right? So Clifton Omar is so familiar with how energy systems work and with how they work within a government and agency structure. So the task feels monumental, right? And I can still see that anger and despair, right? I think it's important to remember that other countries have done it. We have other good examples. Clifton Omar, he lives in Finland. He has seen what is possible in the everyday practical reality. We need to learn from people who know how this has worked, not only in terms of the technical details, but in terms of the politics that allowed it to happen. Finland and the Scandinavian countries used to be deeply, deeply inequitable. This did not happen by magic. Yes, mass movements were part of why those countries changed, as well as the coordination and the connection and the problem solving of people with incredible expertise and scientific knowledge. There are democratic structures and institutions in Finland that you could tell us about, from the community level all the way up. So, enough. Let's take a break. And if you can, come back. We'll keep you updated on what is being said. We will keep sharing notes. We will soon be sharing, everybody who signs in will get a Slack invitation and an invitation to Google Docs. Thank you.